Cargo handler David Martinez worked at a grimy frontier trading station, the kind of place where authorities deliberately looked the other way, where illegal goods moved through channels with the right bribes paid, where slavery technically didn't exist on paper, but absolutely thrived under different polite names like labor contracts and indentured service. He'd been working there for 2 years, saving money to eventually leave and find something cleaner, somewhere less morally compromised. But frontier stations paid well precisely because they operated in legal gray zones most people preferred not to examine too closely. Then he saw her hiding in one of the cargo holds during a routine inventory check. A young Thessaran woman, clearly injured, wearing the kind of restraints designed for contract laborers, which was the polite legal fiction covering actual slavery in frontier territories where alliance law enforcement had minimal presence. She was attempting to hide behind shipping containers, terrified and desperate, clearly having recently escaped from whoever legally owned her contract. David knew the smart course of action: report her location to station security, collect the standard finder's fee, don't get involved in complicated station politics or legal gray areas. But he looked at her, terrified, injured, wearing restraints that were barely disguised shackles, and made a different choice entirely. "I'm not going to report you," he said quietly, staying at a non-threatening distance. "But you can't stay hidden here. Station security conducts regular sweeps of all cargo areas. You need to get off this station entirely if you want actual freedom." She didn't trust him initially. Why would she trust any human when humans ran most of the slavery operations in frontier space, when humans were the ones who'd put those restraints on her in the first place? But she was desperate and injured enough that she accepted his offered help when he proposed smuggling her onto an outbound transport heading toward Alliance Corps territories. Over the next 3 days, David hid her in his cramped quarters, treated her injuries with black market medical supplies he acquired through station contacts, forged the documentation that might get her past minimal security checks, and carefully identified a transport vessel heading to Alliance Corps territories where slavery was actually prosecuted instead of tacitly accepted as economic reality. She told him her name was Lyra. Didn't tell him much else about her background or circumstances. He assumed because she didn't fully trust him with identifying details, or because those details were too painful to share with a stranger. He didn't push for information she wasn't willing to give. On the day she was leaving, hidden carefully in cargo containers David had meticulously arranged to avoid security scanning, she asked him directly, "Why are you helping me? You're risking your job, possibly your freedom if you're caught. I have absolutely nothing to offer you in return for this risk." "Because it's the right thing to do," David said simply. "And because I've been working at this morally compromised frontier station for 2 years telling myself it's temporary, that I'm saving money, that I'm not actually complicit just because I don't directly participate in the worst practices. Helping you escape is the first genuinely right thing I've done in those 2 years, instead of just not technically wrong things that let me sleep at night." David did lose his job when station security eventually figured out someone had helped the escaped contract laborer disappear. He didn't get formally prosecuted. They couldn't prove his involvement definitively enough for criminal charges. But he was immediately blacklisted from all frontier station employment, his reputation destroyed in those circles. He eventually found similar cargo handling work in Alliance Corps territories for substantially less pay, but in locations where slavery wasn't politely ignored as unfortunate economic necessity. He never regretted helping Lyra. He thought about her sometimes, hoped she'd made it somewhere genuinely safe, hoped she'd built a life free from whoever had owned her contract. But he never expected to see her again. She'd been clear she wanted to disappear completely, and he'd helped her do exactly that. 5 years passed with no contact. David was working at a major alliance station in core territories when a Thessaran diplomatic vessel requested standard docking clearance. Nothing particularly unusual. Thessaran diplomats passed through this station frequently for various alliance business. He processed the docking request mechanically, didn't think anything special about it. Then the vessel's primary passenger disembarked, and David's entire world stopped. It was Lyra. Except she wasn't dressed like an escaped slave or a desperate refugee trying to disappear. She was wearing formal noble attire worth more than David earned in a year, accompanied by a significant security detail, moving with the natural confidence of someone completely accustomed to authority and immediate deference. And she was walking directly toward him with obvious, deliberate purpose. "David Martinez?" she asked formally, though her expression clearly showed she knew exactly who he was. "I've been actively searching for you for 2 years. You're a remarkably difficult man to track down when you deliberately don't want to be found and have changed stations multiple times." "Lyra, what? What are you doing here? And why do you have a royal security detail?" "My actual name is Kaelrissa. I am, now, Queen of the Thessaran Confederation. 5 years ago, I was kidnapped by slavers, held for ransom that was never paid because my family had been led to believe I was dead. When the ransom didn't materialize as expected, I was sold to labor contractors to recoup their investment before I could be permanently disappeared into frontier labor systems where no one would ever find me. You helped me escape before that could happen. I've been searching for you persistently since I regained my position to properly thank you for saving my life." David could barely process what he was hearing. The terrified, injured woman he'd helped escape 5 years ago had been royalty the entire time. "I didn't know any of that. You didn't tell me." "I didn't tell you because I genuinely didn't know if I could trust you with that information when we first met. And honestly, at that specific point in time, I wasn't sure I would ever successfully reclaim my position. My entire family believed I was dead. I had no proof of identity that would be recognized. I was just desperately trying to survive and reach somewhere I could contact people who might recognize me and help me prove who I actually was." Kaelrissa explained what had happened after David helped her escape. She'd made it successfully to Alliance core territories using the carefully forged documents he'd created. Spent several difficult months working menial jobs while attempting to contact people who could verify her actual identity. Finally reached someone from her family's diplomatic corps who recognized her despite her changed appearance and initiated the extremely complex process of proving she was the supposedly dead princess. Reclaimed her legitimate position after more than a year of intricate political and legal battles to prove her identity conclusively. Became queen 2 years ago when her mother died unexpectedly, and she was next in the succession line. Had spent the past 2 years trying persistently to track down the frontier cargo handler who'd saved her life, working with only a first name and vague memories of which station she'd escaped from. "Why search for me so persistently? You made it back successfully. You're queen now. I'm just a cargo handler who did one decent thing. You risked everything, your job, your freedom, possibly even your life, to help someone you believed was just an escaped slave with absolutely nothing to offer you in return. You did it because it was the right thing to do, even though it cost you significantly. That's not just one decent thing, that's fundamental character that deserves recognition and gratitude." "I don't need recognition or gratitude. I'm genuinely glad you're safe and you reclaimed your life. That knowledge is enough for me. Perhaps that's sufficient for you. It's not sufficient for me. In Thessaran culture, life debt is considered sacred obligation. You saved me from permanent slavery or death. I owe you a debt that cannot be simply dismissed just because you don't personally want recognition. I don't want repayment. The entire point of helping you was that it was the right thing to do regardless of personal benefit, not that I'd eventually get something out of it." Kaelrissa's expression showed both visible frustration and something that looked like deep respect. "I'm not offering repayment as simple transaction or business exchange. I'm offering genuine gratitude and friendship from someone whose entire life you fundamentally changed through your courage. Will you at least accept that?" David reluctantly accepted Kaelrissa's offer to at least maintain some contact going forward. What he initially expected to be occasional formal messages expressing continued gratitude became genuine friendship, as they discovered they actually enjoyed talking to each other well beyond the dramatic circumstances of how they'd originally met. Kaelrissa offered him several positions within Thessaran diplomatic service, roles that would effectively use his existing skills, but in completely legitimate, legal contexts far removed from frontier stations' moral gray zones. He initially refused repeatedly, deeply uncomfortable with what felt like charity or obligation-based employment rather than genuine merit. But she remained persistent. I'm not offering you these positions purely out of obligation or gratitude. I'm offering them because you have specific skills I genuinely need and character I've learned to trust completely. The fact that you saved my life 5 years ago makes me trust your fundamental character. Your actual qualifications and experience make you legitimately suitable for the work itself. Eventually, after months of consideration, David accepted a position as logistics coordinator for Thessaran diplomatic missions, essentially doing what he'd always done professionally, managing complex cargo and supply chains, but for legitimate diplomatic operations instead of morally compromised frontier stations. The work was genuinely challenging, paid substantially well, and didn't require him to deliberately ignore slavery happening in plain sight around him. Over months of working together in professional capacity, their relationship gradually deepened well beyond gratitude or purely professional collaboration. She told him more about the extremely difficult year she'd spent trying to reclaim her identity, the complex political battles required to prove she was alive and legitimate, the ongoing challenges of serving as queen when most people had believed you were dead for years. He told her about his 2 years at that frontier station, the various moral compromises he'd made to keep his job, how helping her had been simultaneously the easiest and hardest choice he'd made, because it finally forced him to actually act on his stated principles instead of just holding them passively while doing nothing. 2 years after her unexpected return to his life, Kael'rissa made another unexpected proposal. I searched for you persistently for 2 years after becoming queen, not just to repay some cultural debt or offer formal gratitude. Because in those 3 days you helped me escape, you showed me what genuine integrity actually looks like in practice. You've since become one of my most trusted advisors and my closest personal friend. I'm asking if you'd consider becoming more than that to me. You're a queen ruling an interstellar confederation. I'm a cargo handler who happened to do the right thing once. You're someone who chose principles over personal safety, who helped a complete stranger at significant personal cost, who's proven his fundamental character repeatedly over the 2 years we've worked together. Your background circumstances don't change that reality. I'm not asking you to be king. Thessaran succession doesn't work that way constitutionally. I'm asking if you'd be my life partner, my bonded companion, the person I trust most completely in the entire galaxy. David took substantial time to consider carefully. Not because he didn't care deeply about her. He'd been gradually falling for her over 2 years without fully acknowledging those developing feelings. But because accepting meant entering a world of political complexity, constant public scrutiny, and responsibilities he'd never sought or prepared for. Eventually, he said yes, not because she was a queen with power and resources, but because she was Kael'rissa, the person who'd become the single most important person in his life over 2 years of genuine friendship, mutual respect, and gradually deepening trust and affection. Years later, the story of the queen and the cargo handler became widely known across both Thessaran and human territories. Not as simplified romance or fairy tale, but as genuine account of how one act of principled courage created ripples that fundamentally changed 2 lives. When people asked David why he had helped an enslaved woman escape, knowing it would certainly cost him his job and possibly his freedom, he remained characteristically direct. I'd spent 2 years working at a frontier station, telling myself I wasn't actually complicit in the slavery happening constantly around me, because I didn't directly participate in it myself. Helping her escape was me finally admitting that passive acceptance of injustice is its own form of complicity, and that doing the genuinely right thing matters more than protecting your comfortable position and steady income. I didn't know she was royalty. I knew she was a person who desperately needed help, and I had the capability to provide it. That was sufficient reason. And Kael'rissa's perspective on why she had searched for him persistently for 2 years after becoming queen. He risked absolutely everything for someone he believed was just an escaped slave with nothing whatsoever to offer him in return. He did it because it was right, not because he expected any reward or recognition. That kind of genuine integrity is extraordinarily rare. When I became queen, I finally had the resources to find him and properly express my gratitude. But what began as gratitude and cultural obligation transformed into genuine friendship, and that friendship eventually became love. I didn't fall for him because he saved my life. I fell for him because 2 years of working closely together showed me exactly who he is as a person. Someone whose actions consistently match his stated principles, who will choose doing right over doing easy, who sees people as people regardless of their social status or what they can offer him. I helped an enslaved alien woman escape. Later, she returned, revealed as a queen, became their story. Not about reward or repayment, but about how one moment of genuine courage creates connections and consequences neither person could have predicted, and how sometimes the most important relationships begin with one person simply choosing to do what's right regardless of personal cost. David had helped because it was right. Clarissa had searched for him because gratitude and cultural obligation demanded it. And through that searching and the friendship that developed afterward, they'd both found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed.